Welcome. This is a brief operator's guide to show queue systems, and my name is Ray Stevens. What we hope to do in this short video is cover the basic operation of show queue systems, allowing you, the operator, to run a show. Okay, so let's start show queue system by double-clicking the icon on the desktop. So one of the core features of SCS is that it will automatically load the last queue file that you had running. So if you're running a show, there's no need to go hunting for that particular file. But before we begin, let's just check and make sure that we have the correct queue file loaded. And in this case, what we're looking at is the SCS 10 demo queue file. Well, that's good. So let's go ahead and maximize this by clicking the maximize button on the top right hand corner so that we can see what's going on here. Now, when you first start looking at SCS, you'll see there's a lot going on, a lot of information up on the screen. So let's just take a moment to go through each of the sections in turn. In the middle of the screen is the queue list, showing all the queues contained in this queue file. A lot of information going on in there. And again, we'll come back to the detail here later. Towards the bottom, we have the queue panel. And the queue panel shows the current queues that are either loaded, waiting to be executed, or queues that are actually running at that moment. To the right of the queue panel is the hotkey panel. Now this may or may not be displayed depending on whether the sound designer has given you the option to actually execute queues by pressing a single key on the keyboard. Towards the top of the screen we have the ribbon toolbar. And the ribbon toolbar contains all the tools and utilities that you're going to be able to use to control the queue file. And just under that is, in my opinion, possibly the most important thing on the screen. It's the next manual queue. This is actually going to show you the queue that you are just about to execute. Okay then, so that's the layout of SCS. Let's get this show running, shall we? To the top, where the toolbar is, you'll see there are some buttons. Let's just focus on two of them right now. The Go button and the Stop All. The Go button will execute the next manual queue. That's indicated by the next manual queue, which you see in this case is Q1, fanfare. Now you can execute the Go one of three ways. You can either click using the mouse on the green arrow, or you can use the right mouse button anywhere on the screen. Thirdly, you can just use the spacebar on the keyboard. Choose which version you prefer, and my advice would be stick to it. Get comfortable with that method. There's no wrong way, it's your way. Choose how you prefer to do it. But be comfortable and understand you'll probably be doing this in limited light. So while you're practicing this, make sure you can find the keyboard or the mouse very easily. The other button that I want you to be aware of is the Stop All button. Now the Stop All button can either be executed by clicking the big red square or by hitting the Escape button on the keyboard. Now you might want to hit the Stop All because a queue will be executed accidentally and you want to quickly bring everything to a stop. Well, that's what the Stop All button's there for. I'll show you how that works later in a minute. But first, let's start that first queue. So here we go. Our next queue is going to be the fanfare, and I'm going to execute it by simply clicking on Q1. Okay, well, let's rerun that queue again, but this time I want to pay attention to a couple of things that are going on the screen. To rerun that queue again, I'd need a reset. You'll notice that Q1 has now become black on grey. This means that the queue's been executed and we've moved on. But again, let's look back at the next manual queue section. It now says Q2 helicopter. That is indeed the next queue that we're going to be running. So if we wanted to execute Q2, we would just simply click the Go button. But I want to go back again. Let's go back and rerun Q1 again. And I simply do that by selecting Q1. Now we have white on blue. Indicates that the queue is ready to run. And again, we look at next manual queue and it says Q1 is fanfare. Okay, let's start that queue again. But this time we want to look down at the queue panel to see what's going on down there. If you look down towards the bottom, you'll see that the queue's running and it's counting down how long the queue has left to run. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on the queue panel to see the queues that are actually running. Sometimes the queue could run in a loop, and that's worth knowing. We'll come back to loops in a second. But let's carry on with the show. Where are we? Let's look at the next manual queue. Next manual queue says Q2, helicopter. Okay, so let's start it up. So you'll see on the screen that the helicopter is running as it faded in. And you'll see the levels fade out. Yeah, and now we're ready. Okay, let's run the next manual queue. What is it? It's Q3, car starting and running. Okay, off we go. So the next manual queue is Q4, skid and crash. But when are we going to run that? Well, we'd run it at the end of Q3, wouldn't we? Well, this is what gets interesting. Q3 is never going to end. If you look back down at the queue panel, you'll see that it says X-fade and loops. What that means is it's going to crossfade into the next queue and it's looping. Watch. Did you see the green arrow jump? Basically, the car is going to drive forever until you stop it. There he goes again. So, how do we stop Q3? Well, the sound designer has built it in that Q4 is actually going to stop Q3. So, let's run Q4. Hang on a minute. That's Q5 running. How did Q5 start? Well, if we look back on the queue list, you'll see that Q5, police, starts 2.5 AE Q4. Well, what does that mean? What that means is it's going to start 2.5 seconds after the end of Q4, meaning there's nothing for you to do. Well, that's great. So you only have to activate Q4, and Q4 will stop Q3 and start Q5. The sound designer's done a good job here. So, what's next? Let's look at the next manual queue. Next manual queue is Q50, intermission. Okay, well, let's get the intermission rolling. People will probably want biscuits and coffee. No, intermission music. And again, like the car running, this is going to run forever. It's basically a playlist of 4 tracks that have been strung together by the sound designer. And this will run until you stop it. And when are you going to stop it? Well, you'll stop it using the next manual cue. And the next manual cue is Q50.1, fade out intermission. Well, here comes the audience again, back from their coffee. Excellent. Let's click that button. And out goes the intermission music. So, before we start Act 2, I just want to take a moment to point out a little error condition that might occur during a show. Let's say you want to run an internet browser just to check something, or run another application. So, let's do this. We're going to hit the Start button, and we're going to go and run Internet Explorer. Oh, it's Google. No problem. We do whatever we're going to do and we're finished. So we close that down. But look at the bottom of the screen. There's a warning message. The warning message says, warning, SCS main window currently does not have focus. Left click here to reset focus. Now, this is quite important. What this means is that the SCS program has effectively lost control of the screen. You've gone off to another program and given it priority. It's easily fixed. You simply follow the directions, move the mouse down and click to reset the focus. But it's important to remember to keep an eye out for that message. If during a show you run another application for whatever reason and SCS loses focus, you must come back and click on the bar so that it regains focus. If you don't, when you go to hit the next manual cue, you may miss it. SCS won't have control of the keyboard, and if you're using the space bar, you definitely won't fire the next cue. So just keep an eye out for that yellow message at the bottom of the screen. So here we are, beginning of Act 2. And our next manual cue is the Rainforest Ambience, Q6. But let's just take a moment and see where we are. All the cues for Act 1, cues 1 through to Q50.1, are all now effectively greyed out. They're black on grey. They're still on the list, they're still available to us if we wanted to, but it's indicating that they've already been run. If we wanted to go back, say we were in rehearsal and we wanted to rerun Act 1 again, just from the car starting and running, well, that would be a simple case of clicking on Q3. It's as easy as this. Watch. Next manual cue is currently Q6. I simply want to go back to Q3, I go back to Q3 and left click on it. The cue list is now reset and the colours are returned to the cues that are ready to run. Q1 and Q2 were before, they're still grey. Fine, and we're off. But look, next manual cue says Q3, so we're back at Q3. We could start the car again and rehearse Act 1. But let's not. Let's jump forward again to Q6. Simple case, click on Q6, left click, and the next manual cue changes to Q6. So, here we are. We're ready for the second act. Okay, so let's activate Q6. Oh no! I didn't want to activate Q6. We want to stop it. And this is where the stop all button comes. This is looping now and it's a rainforest ambience, but I want to stop this sound because I hit the button by mistake. Hit stop all and everything stops. Whatever's running ceases. No fade outs, it just stops. Great, not a problem. You can either hit the red stop or you can hit the escape key on the keyboard. It's in the top left hand corner. Again, as I recommended at the beginning, make sure you know where these keys are and practice and rehearse yourself with them, because you might have to find these keys in the dark. Anyway, we stopped the cues. That's great. But this is slightly different. Notice although we ran Q6 and it was the next manual cue and then we stopped it, it didn't increment to the next cue. If, for whatever reason, you actually wanted to go to Q7, you would have to manually navigate there. Simple as that. Okay, well let's go back to Q6 anyway. That cue's coming up right now. Navigate back to it, and let's start that cue. So here we have Q6 running. Let's run Q7, bird call. Wow, there's a lot going on here. What the sound designer has done is used a lot of individual bird call sounds and is looping through them. This will carry on until you stop it. And again, what the sound designer has done is built Q9, the next manual cue, which, as it says, will stop forest and birds. And again, this sound will run until you stop it. Right, I think that's enough of that. Let's stop that. So, click go. And the rainforest fades away. Well, here we are. We're almost at the end of the show. But we haven't talked about hotkeys yet. Sometimes sound designers like to give the operator the ability to run sounds that are not part of the general cue list, and they don't necessarily follow a sequence. Such an example might be a boat whistle or a goose horn or a gunshot or an explosion that has to be timed to an event on stage. In those cases, that's where hotkeys come in. The sound designer will let you know what you're going to be using them for, and the director should be giving you some cues as to when you will be running them. But they're literally as simple as watching and finding out what keys you're going to be pressed. So in this instance, I hit B, I get the boat whistle. I hit G, I get a goose horn. And finally, the ship siren. I can actually fire SBG pretty much at the same time. Or I can hit B, 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 B. Or S, S, G, S, B, B. Yeah. And that's enough of that. In my personal experience, the hotkeys don't get used that much. I personally have programmed them once, and that was for an explosion. But they get used. Check with your sound designer and find out what they're using. If they haven't put any in, that panel won't even display. So, finally, it's Tiger Island, the music that ends the show. So, we click the go button again. And the next manual cue is the fade out of the music. Actors take their bows, leave the stage, lights go down, and click. That's it. So now if you want to exit the program, it's just a simple case of going up to the top right hand corner and exiting, and sometimes you might get this message: turn off computer channels on sound desk now. Basically what you need to do is switch the amps off and make sure everything's completely switched down before you turn the computer off. So, just a quick reminder, say OK, and we're back to the desktop again. So, there you have it. Show Cue System, version 10, Operator's Guide. I hope this has been useful for you. If you would like further information, if you go to showcuesystems.com, you'll see that there's a lot of resource there, some documentation and some useful guides. But hopefully this was a quick run through for you, and I really do hope that it was useful. Future videos I hope to cover editing and actually creating some cues. We'll get a little more in depth, but for now, thanks for listening. My name is Ray Stevens. Break a leg.